Moving here. My name is George Mount. I'm a Microsoft Excel MVP, the author of a couple of books, LinkedIn Learning instructor. I teach data analytics for a living. This is a time for me to both give back to the community and test out, new ideas, new topics, see what people are interested in, what people have questions on, and so forth. So today, particularly, as discussed in the event description, we're going to be looking at the advanced analysis features for Copilot in Excel using Python. So we're going to look at how to use those three tools together. I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of the kind of origin story behind these tools and what I think is happening in the market. And I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. I do have everybody's cameras and microphones shut off just because in the past I've had issues with like hot mics and Zoom bombs and stuff like that, if you could believe it. But you're welcome to use that chat box. And I will respond promptly. So this is a bit of a dress rehearsal almost for me. Next week is the Global Excel Summit out in London. I'm going to be talking about some similar topics, and this is kind of an extended cut slash dress rehearsal for that. So if you're coming to the summit, you'll know what I'm going to be talking about, kind of, and I'll probably refine it a little bit. If you aren't able to make it, then this is your opportunity to learn a little bit more today. So our objectives, and I plan to go for about an hour, but that always kind of varies. It's never going to be over an hour, and I will send out, like I said, the recording after. How can we bring Python, Excel, and Copilot together? And why is that really necessary? What is driving the marketplace to maybe look for a solution like this, right? With trends in generative AI, with trends in data analytics, like why is this the right place at the right time for using these three tools together? And what makes this such an exciting possibility to really enable that citizen data scientist model, right? I think Excel has its data analytics and BI down pretty well. We've had Power Query and Power Pivot in Excel for close on to 15 years. People are still discovering it, but it's been there. Okay, so if you want to operate as like a BI developer, a data analyst in Excel, we have those tools now. Okay, now this is really the second wave of that. How can we become a citizen data scientist in Excel using these tools without having Python necessarily being that barrier to entry where the coding is just too difficult? And we're going to talk more about those trends in a minute here. So I see some people coming in. Let me go ahead and do the typical slide share here because we are going to be looking at some demos in a second. I don't just want to talk. Uh, but the download files are going to be right here. I think that's what the next slide is. No, the next slide is actually some trends. But I put the download files in the chat. So those of you who have never been here before, just to quickly run through this, all you should need to do is just click that link and it is going to download. So if you want to look at the slides, if you want the links to some of the like trends and like dates, announcement release dates and things like that that I'll be sharing, you can head over right there. So go ahead and make sure to extract it. Otherwise, you might have some problems with following along. I am on a PC. I'm assuming everybody's here on a PC. There are so many versions of Copilot and Python and Excel out there that I'll do my best to help you out if you don't see something when we get to the demos, but hopefully everybody at least has the files. Uh, Give me a little like thumbs up if you can. I'm gonna leave a thumbs up reaction like right underneath where I said I have the downloads. If you can just let me know that you're able to do that. Okay, great. I see one more. I'll wait for a couple more. And the other message here is chances are somebody's probably going to come in late. So if that's the case and they're asking for the downloads, go ahead and share it if you could. Okay, so I'm going to wait, just make sure everybody can do that. Again, you just click that link, extract the folder. You'll see the slides. You'll see the workbooks that we're going to use in a second here. Any questions about anything as we kind of get started up here? Awesome. And hello to a lot of familiar names, and welcome to some of the less familiar names. You'll see I do a lot of these events, and we'll talk about that toward the end. All right, so let's get back into the content. And again, if you do have a question, I will keep my eyes on that chat. So first thing I want to talk about is this phenomenon of Python in Excel. Now, I took some data from Google Trends. I was playing around with this like a couple days ago, and I thought this would be an interesting way to try to tell the story with data on data in Excel. Okay, so if you look for the trends with Python and Excel, the public preview came out in the fall of 2023, and I have a couple other dates that we're going to follow up on, but I took this from the beginning of 2022, because I think by the end of like 2022 into 2023, that's when a lot of these generative AI tools were starting to come to market and starting to become household names. So I used that as my beginner date. The interest for Python and Excel goes way, way back, many, many years, but I just took that as my start date. And you'll notice that it was, pretty constant. This y-axis is kind of a mysterious, what Google Trends calls like its search interest. So I don't really have like a great unit of measurement for you, but we can at least look at the trends, and we can notice that there was a big spike in interest right when Python and Excel was released. So people have been talking about it. People were interested in Python and Excel for quite a long time. And then the announcement came, and it was almost like business as normal after that. And you could almost say that the interest has like dropped a little bit. One thing to be aware of with some of the big dips is those are usually Christmas holidays. So when you see times like this one or even like this last big dip, those are usually just because people are logged off over Christmas and not looking at Excel. At least the normal people aren't doing that. I probably am. But anyway, you'll see that like these trends are constant, and it was just really a honeymoon period for Python and Excel. And then after that, the people, I don't know, people just kind of threw up their hands and maybe they weren't that interested. And this is the kind of a story that I feel like I've, as somebody who's really advocated for Python and Excel, that I've heard a lot, right? So I say, this is a good skill to have. Consider it. I'm not forcing it down anyone's throat. I think that's an important way to sell Python, I think, for Excel users, is it's a nice plus one. It's not substituting, it's complementing. Because I think there are those kind of hardcore data science developer people who are like, you've got to do everything with Python. Excel sucks. Get rid of Excel. No, that's not really the message we're sending. We're saying that they're better together, right? But I think the typical response to that was like, oh, that's really hard. I don't really see a good use case for that. And my train of thought was always, well, you're already kind of a good coder if you know Excel really well. I see people put functions together in Excel that are pretty hardcore, right? Now we have Lambda functions in Excel. I mean, it's what computer scientists would call a Turing complete language. You can do a lot of mathematics in Excel now, and people do a lot of amazing things with it. So it's really not above the ability of most Excel users to learn a little bit of Python, especially when most of these data analytics tools were really built for people who also don't have that data science, or I should say like computer science or development background, right? They're not thoroughbred computer developers or software programmers. Um, so you can give them some use cases. People want to know, well, I want the plug and play solutions that I can use in my work. And often you'll see that there is a little bit of an overlap. So whether it's something like time series or building a chart or maybe basic statistical analysis, it's not quite enough of a sell. People still aren't really sold on learning Python and Excel on its own, right? When they see the tool on its own, they don't necessarily see it as something that they want to invest the time into. Let me check if there are any questions in the chat. Okay, everybody's doing okay so far. So hopefully this is a good setting of the stage. Okay. And I think one of the things that really happened here was that Copilot came, and that really accelerated that narrative, in my opinion, of it's not really worth learning how to code. Because how many people came on LinkedIn and said, oh, generative AI just killed the coder. We don't need programming anymore. You can do it. And that narrative, I think, has some merits and demerits to it. But I think that might have even, it was just kind of the wrong place at the wrong time for Python and Excel, because Copilot became commercially available. I don't think it was actually November 1st, so I'll have to check that date, but it was sometime in November of 2023. So it was just a few weeks later. And I don't know if any of you have used Copilot in Excel, but I think in general, and this isn't to pick on any one person, but I know Wynn Hopkins, another Excel MVP, has been very like vocally not happy with Copilot. I don't think a lot of people were happy with Copilot in Excel. I don't know if you've used it. You're welcome to share your thoughts in the chat. I like to think that it's almost got a catch-22 where you need to know some things about Excel to use Copilot, but if you know those things about Excel, you don't need Copilot, right? So if you're going to get help with like adding a formula or conditional formatting or creating basic graphs or pivot tables or things like that, I mean, it's cool that Copilot can help you with that stuff, but you need to be enough of a thinker, of a data analyst yourself that you don't need it to do it. It's probably faster to do it yourself. So Copilot in Excel, I mean, it's getting a lot better, and I don't know, if people are using it, but especially when it came out right toward the end of 2023, I think it was just a lot of so what, I don't know, whatever, not that interested. All right. Last but not least, advanced analysis, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. I think this is really where things get interesting because you could almost make the case that these three tools, I mean, particularly Copilot and Python, are almost kind of competing with each other for the same user base. And I think people are a little bit confused about what tool should I be using when. I think that's been a problem with Excel for a long time because there's Power Query, the Power Pivot, Lambda, dynamic array functions. I think people get confused, and I think adding Python and Copilot were almost the proverbial straws breaking the camel's back. And people are just a little wary of adopting a new tool. They might be confused about what tool to use when. So, you could maybe make the argument that some of the search interest for the advanced analysis, or we're looking for Copilot in Excel, maybe there's some like competition here. I don't know if it's such a small dip, and you could definitely dive into this data more deeply. But I'm just wondering if there's kind of a narrative here where Python and Excel in itself is proverbially, it's too difficult. Copilot in Excel is too easy, right? And Copilot, Python, and Excel is just right. So that's really what we're going to talk about today. We're going to get into some hands-on examples here, okay? And I just had to throw this in there because it's one of my favorite memes. It is one of the most ambitious crossover events, and I think it's really set to change how we use Excel and how we think about data analytics. And it could really challenge what I think is the typical approach that people have toward business intelligence, data analytics. I've seen a growing amount of conversation about this on LinkedIn about the future of BI, data analytics, particularly as it relates to AI. So I think this is a really cool example because what's more popular than Excel? That's what most people use. That's the overwhelmingly most popular tool for handling data in the business world on, a per user basis, right? There are maybe a billion users of Excel. So this is a really important place to really see at the grassroots where these trends might be taking us. Okay. So a couple more things, and then I promise we'll get to some demos because it's probably what most of you are here for. This is the kind of stuff that I'll be sharing mostly at the Global Excel Summit, just as kind of high level thought through where these tools are taking us. But Excel in itself is an old tool. It has a lot of layers. If you think about VBA, you think about Power Query, Power Pivot, the formula language, there's the charting engine. There's just a lot, there are a lot of layers, and that makes it really difficult. And that's, I think, one problem people have had with Copilot in Excel is they want help with macros. Well, it can't get into VBA. They want help with Power Query. Well, it can't really get into Power Query. You can use it to help with those tools, but it's not embedded helping you in those specific slices of the stack yet. Excel in itself, the workbook grid is really simple. It's almost too simple, things like it doesn't have missing values, right? Even things like dates sometimes are a problem. So it's almost not quite got the rules that are really needed to give a good college try for AI or data science or Python. So what's really nice about all this with Python is it's got this just enormous code base that these one-off languages in Excel don't necessarily have. Something like VBA even, or something like DAX. They're great for these ad hoc kind of, they have a very pinpointed structure of when you should use them and why. And Excel has turned into this very siloed application. And, that causes a lot of problems for something like Copilot and generative AI. What's really nice about Python is it can handle all those things. Maybe it's not the best single tool for any of those, but it's pretty good at each one of those steps. So what we can do is use Python as a tool to help us with data cleaning, with data visualization, with data analysis, and we can really build an end-to-end data science, almost like a Jupyter notebook if you're familiar with using Python to do that. So using that big code base, skipping out on some of the siloed natures of Excel, and getting into some cool data science insights and really letting people operate as citizen data scientists in Excel. So that's what we're going to do now. We do have a demo. Let me just check the chat here. Python is the second best language for everything. Could I extend the time period? Yeah, I just set it for the end of 2024. You can check there's a question about going out to 2025. I just set it to 2024 because, the dates keep changing. So I want to make sure that I have the same parameters set through the summit. But there are links in the slide deck if you want to experiment with the dates and go back. Google Trends go back to 2004, and there was even interest in Python and Excel like way back then. And yes, as Owen says, Python is the second best language for everything. So what we're going to do is try a demo here. Okay, this is the moment of truth. I've never done this before, surprisingly, but I have embedded a Microsoft form quiz into my deck here. So hopefully this is going to load and let you pick what we demo first. Now it doesn't seem to be working so good right now, so this is why I do these. This is why I do these free events. Okay, so that's fine. Okay, maybe it's doing something. I might need to minimize. Let me go out of preview or the slide. Let me go to like a smaller screen. If it doesn't load, that's fine. Now I'll know better. When I was trying it out myself, of course, it was working, but with my screen share running and Microsoft, Teams recording and everything, it's probably a little bit more of a hardcore environment to push through. So what we're gonna do is let's just walk through them together. I'm gonna start with a basic overview of the tool, and then as time permits, we'll get into some other examples. So I'm glad to know that this doesn't work, so I'm not in front of hundreds of people on the big screen and this poops out on me. Apologies. Okay, let's go ahead and let's share my screen here. Okay, and again, let me share the downloads just to kind of reset the room here. Any questions, comments, thoughts about what we just did, just to give an overview of where we are with Excel, with Python, generative AI, questions about, you'll probably ask more once you actually see this thing in action. Just want to make sure that we're all still on the same page here before we open up Excel. I do see a hand raise. If you can use the chat to answer or to ask any questions, that would be great. So I'll let you work on that, Larry. Hopefully I said that right. And I'm gonna go into, again, I shared the demo files in the chat. We're gonna go into the demo files and let's just do the getting started workbook here. We'll see how much time we have to do all of these. Okay. I do see a question, which tools can be used to track the public interest in Python? Yeah, I actually did an article on that. Let me see if I can find it really quickly. As those of you can get this, if you can get this workbook up, download it if you need it. Let me see if I can find this article. I wrote something about like how to follow trends in data analytics in different places that you can use. Okay, it's right here. I'm going to share that in the link just in case you're interested in playing with this stuff. You can use Google Trends. Google has an Ngram viewer. Stack Overflow has trends. There's some other ones that you can use. So you can experiment with that if you want. Good question. Okay, we're going to go ahead and move into some demos here. We're going to start with the getting started one. And this is a pretty popular just playtime data set. It's penguin measurements. So we're going to use this as a nice, relatively clean, although it has a couple of snags, data set to see what this thing can do for us. So the first thing we want to do, I would definitely suggest storing any data that you have here that you're going to use with Copilot and Excel as a table, particularly with Python. That's going to make the experience a little more robust. Copilot doesn't necessarily need its input data to be a table anymore, but I don't really see the harm in it. And a lot of other tools that you might want to be using in modern Excel, whether it's like Office scripts, Power Automate, name it, work a little better with your data in a table. So if you're not familiar with tables, that's definitely a prerequisite here. I already did it. I put this data into a table. If you want to learn more about working with tables and getting comfortable with them, you can check my book. I've got past webinars. I've probably got more coming up on tables, but we'll keep going here. The other thing is we will want to have our OneDrive turned on, and we want this file saved to OneDrive, I should say. So just make sure that you do that. Autosave, I believe, needs to be on. I'm not sure actually, but it definitely needs to be on your OneDrive that has your Copilot account. And then last but not least, we are going to launch Copilot. Now, depending on how big your data set is, I do have a data set. I don't know if we'll get to, but we have one on text analysis. This one is like tens of thousands of rows. It takes a little while, and even with my screen being shared and being recorded and everything, it takes a little while just to stage everything up. So be patient here. It will take a little time here. This is a pretty small data set, but we should be able to click Copilot and get that running here. Okay, again, if you see something like this doesn't work because you need a one autosave turned on, or you need to upload it to OneDrive, just go ahead and do that. You could just flip the switch up here and upload it to your OneDrive. Okay, let me see if there are any questions. Okay, yes, confirming that autosave does need to be on. Awesome, thank you. Okay. So is everybody able to do this? Let me get like a little show of hands. I have Copilot launched. Yeah, just give me like a thumbs up. Okay, I see 2, I see 3. Okay, cool. All right. And again, if you don't have it, that's a whole other, there could be a whole other webinar, Copilot licensing. But now Copilot's going to suggest some pre-written like prompts and examples. Actually, there is one here that says using Python. This is a little different. This has changed. In the past, there was a dedicated line that would say like analyze my data with Python, but I'm wondering if the product team at Microsoft wants to test out different prompts and ideas and really get a better understanding specifically of what people's use cases are. So yours might be totally different than mine. I remember seeing some one of them in once it said like show me how to insert a table, but my data was already at a table. So again, sometimes it could be kind of naive, and we're still learning and getting more data on how people are using this. But you'll see if I refresh the examples, I actually did see one that said advanced analysis. So if you see it, go ahead and click it right there. This is what we want. If you don't see that, go ahead and just say something similar to like advanced analysis with Python. Okay, so Justin sees it as well. If you don't see it, try to cycle through some examples. So I'm going to go ahead. You could click it if you see it, or just say something like, advanced analysis, or I said analytics. It should, either way should be fine with Python. Go ahead and just run that, and it should work here. Okay, and this will take a second here. It's mining through our table, getting it ready. It's going to give us some rules here. Yes, we can use advanced analysis. Okay. And this is a pretty broad ask, right? So you're going to see that we might get different results, as is the case with generative AI. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to create a new sheet. We're going to automatically write and insert our Python formulas, and we're going to answer our prompt in multiple messages. So this is really meant to let you have a conversation with your data. I don't know if any of you have used analyzed data in the past. This is kind of a precursor. It's the Neanderthal to the advanced intelligence here. But if I go to analyze data, just as an aside, you're going to see it looks similar. It gives us some suggested insights, but it says ask a question about your data. And it really means that ask one question and then you get the answer. And you're not able to say, well, I don't really like this chart. Can you maybe use this different chart type, or, label the axis, please? Things like that. Having that conversation with the data. Analyze data really wasn't set up to do that. It walked so that we could run here with Copilot. So we are going to use Copilot to answer our prompt in multiple messages and get exactly what we want. Use it not just for getting those raw insights, but understanding, is this the right chart to use? Is this the right model to use? Hey, do you think I should have this axis label? Things like that. So that's really the benefit of using Copilot here, not to mention, of course, that the Python code is getting generated for us. So let's go ahead and start advanced analysis. We'll click there. And just as it says, the new worksheet is opened up here. You are going to see kind of a commentary of what Copilot's doing over on the side. All right. And then you're going to notice over here that Python code is being generated. Now, it would definitely be a good idea to be familiar, again, with quite a few things. So this is what I say. It's not for the spreadsheet faint of heart here. There are numerous topics that you should be conversant in. First of all is understanding a little bit of Python in Excel, particularly the Python language. If you have never heard of a data frame, if you see a data frame and you don't know what that is, it's probably where you should stop here, in my opinion. Okay. You should be familiar with, okay, well, this looks like a dynamic array, right? So I'm even just noticing that when I click in and out, you see how the text kind of pops off the screen here. So there are a lot of features, even something like this. We're using linked data types, which is a really nice feature in Excel that lets you work structured in a structured reference format with external data sources. A lot of cool stuff that you can do with this. And again, those are all things that you should be familiar with, I would say, before you try to get yourself into too much trouble with Python and Excel, because I'm sure we've all been burned, or Gen AI has almost burned us with so-called hallucinations, getting the facts wrong, not really doing what we asked for, or maybe we're just too vague with what we want. We don't really know what we want, and we don't give a good prompt. I don't want to place the blame solely on Gen AI. But was everybody able to do that? I was able to run advanced analysis. Just give me a little thumbs up. It's really hard when I'm online. I don't see faces to kind of get those social cues. So if you can give them to me, I definitely appreciate it. Awesome. Any questions as well? Could be about this example particularly, could be about Copilot and Python in general. Anything I can do before we dig into the details here. Okay. So did anybody get, now I don't think this is the case anymore. I feel like Excel has reined in the variation of outputs that you might get here. But did anybody get something that was like a full-on data analysis where it was giving you charts and frequencies and maybe even getting into like a regression model or something like that? I will share that info. So I have a couple of books. There's Advancing into Analytics, and there's Modern Data Analytics in Excel. Yeah. This is new though. This is newer. So I don't necessarily cover these topics in here. Okay. Um, yeah, so I'm guessing so everybody got something pretty similar to this, and nobody got like charts and models and anything there. Okay, so Justin did get something, and he did leave a screenshot where Copilot actually went through. It gave some distributions. It used Python visualizations, and uh, what's really nice is it set up something. It looks like it was able to, I don't know if these are different. Yeah, it looks like they're different variables. So it's able to visualize multiple variables at once, which is always kind of a problem in Excel. It's very hard to build more than one graph at a time. So there's a lot of cool stuff that we can do here, and maybe some of you got a preview, but some of us may have just gotten something like this. So that's just something to be aware of. That depending on generative AI, wherever your algorithm got seeded or whatever, I don't know, you get different things. So we got our data imported, and again, just being familiar with what we did here, we read this data in from the table. This is now a pandas data frame. So it's a good idea to be familiar with how those behave and how those work in Python. And then we can move on to other stuff that we want to talk about. So I don't know if anybody has like a particular insight they're interested in here. I noticed in particular, and one thing that I know Excel isn't so hot with is missing values like we talked about, because it doesn't have a dedicated null keyword as you would in like a database, or even Power Query has that reserved word for a missing value. So something I might be interested in is, how many missing values are in each column. So I can go ahead and have that conversation. So this is really best for these kind of one-off data exploration missions. We could think about a dashboard, and that's really a different thing than what we're doing here. We're really not building a dashboard where you're looking at everything at a glance on one screen. We're really trying to build a up to bottom, top to bottom data story where we're starting with just understanding the data, what's in here, what are the missing values. Then we might move on to data visualizations, understanding those relationships. Then once we really feel like we have a good sense for what this data is all about, we can maybe move on to predictive analytics. So it's really a different way of thinking, I would say, than your typical dashboard. Now, Python can build dashboards. You can definitely build some charts that would look nice in a dashboard in here. But this is really a different kind of a mindset. And I like it personally. I felt like I always felt when I built a dashboard that it was a little arbitrary what I was adding to the chart, and I never felt comfortable. It never felt like a very extensible tool to me. Extensible by, what if the data changes? What if the variables, the relationships change? What's going to happen then? Like, how can I keep this thing? And you think of a dashboard as a static product, but we know data is never static. So I always had a little hesitation with dashboards. Something like this is nice where I feel like, I can get the data, and depending on how those things change, and what I understand differently about the business, right? I can start to ask different questions when I need to. But it is really kind of a one-off sort of a process. Setting this thing up as something that you would repeat time and again, you could do, but I wouldn't. It's not really built to do that off the bat. Okay, so yeah, good call out here for Owen. It says the result of missing values are wrong. There are multiple rows with blanks in the sex column. Need to check the code. So there's already something that's not working here. So this is why it's maybe good to um, validate your data. There are other tools in Excel, like you can use Power Query for data profiling. So let's go ahead and look in the code here and see exactly what is happening. Now we can do this a couple of ways. If we go over to the worksheet, you'll notice that we get a code block that is in our formula bar. So those of you who have used Python and Excel before, we can move this out. So this is saying is null. So I'm wondering what is happening. Yeah, that's a good call there. So Owen's suggesting if a cell contains an empty string, replace it with NaN. So let's go ahead and try that and see what happens. Okay, because what we're seeing here is that it's not necessarily picking up every missing value found in the data set. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and try that, and we'll see what we get here. Okay. All right, so there we go. I think it was, okay, it says NP. This might work. We'll see what happens. Okay. You can always get a preview of the data by either clicking on this card. Python will give you a preview that spills into the worksheet here. Okay, and now what we're going to do is let's see if this changes. Okay, that is a different number. um, so I'm wondering what happened is because we're going to notice, right? This is a text-based or a string-based column. If something, when we made that conversion from Excel into Python, something just didn't get right converted over correctly, and maybe there are spaces in here. That's probably why. If you click in the worksheet, you're going to notice that it's not quite totally blank where it says, or maybe I'm wrong. Am I right or wrong? No, okay. I thought there was like a leading space in there. I thought that might have been the reason, but it doesn't look like it. I think it's because it used is null, and if it used is NA, yeah, that could be possible as well. So you definitely need to, be alert. And for those of you who are like, oh my God, this is useless, it's already wrong. Well, yeah, it'll get smarter probably, but like if you were doing this stuff by yourself, you'd need to do this anyway, right? You need to try different methods. You need to validate your data. You need to make sure that you don't have leading spaces that are maybe causing that conversion into a string and missing values to go wrong. So again, this isn't really meant to do the work for you, but it can definitely help you think through these processes. Um, so let's go ahead and move on to another example. Is there anything else that anybody wants me to ask it, or like, were you able to come up with an insight on your own, just to get us started here? So, something like, what percentage of values are missing. So this is really nice too, where maybe you finally have your result. If you just want to port it into a different format, putting things in percentages are a nice way to contextualize your data, because these raw numbers sometimes don't really click with your audience, or with you as the analyst. So what's really nice here is that we could continue to ask Python to format the data on our own, or ask Python with Python code to format this into a percentage. But if we wanted to just quickly, and this is where things are really nice with Excel, because it's so easy with front end formatting and user input and things like that, doing things like making this appear on the top as a percentage is a lot easier to do in Excel than it would be in Python. So if you want to, if you want to just quickly convert something into currency, or because again, this is really ad hoc kind of analysis, you can do that. Whereas with Python, it's not really meant to be like a data presentation tool. It can be certainly used as that, but it's first and foremost meant to process data, and not necessarily make it look pretty, right? It's not really concerned about making things look pretty to the extent that Excel is. Okay. Uh, so, maybe we wanted to get a little more advanced, and we just covered missing values. We saw that there are some issues. One thing that might be interesting here is maybe going on the flip side and thinking about outliers. I know a lot of people are interested in finding anomalies in their data. They want to make sure that there aren't any values that could skew the others if you're doing an analysis, or this is just another good thing to check for, to make sure that your data is clean. So when we do this one, what's really nice about Copilot is, again, it's not like analyze data where it really is meant to just do one thing at a time for us. What we can do here is really try to get some ideas before we dive into the analysis. So we could say something like, what are some common methods for outlier detection? And again, you want to validate this. It's possible that some of these aren't really applicable to the data set or the task at hand. So this is really good though, if we're just trying to jog our memory. Maybe it's been a while since we've done this. And we've heard of z-scores, right? We've done it before, but it's been a while. We could just kind of jog our memory here, and you have that intuition to know when something is bogus versus when there's something to it, right? So we could use a z-score, we could use an IQR, right? We could visualize. So there are different ways. what are the pros and cons of each. So this is really where I think the Copilot nature comes in, where you're not just assigning it tasks, you are actually using it as a partner and like almost a pair programmer to get some thoughts. So we could use a z-score or what works well. Think about normally distributed data. So depending on the model we're trying to run, maybe you're interested in that. Visualizations are easy. Okay, they are subjective, but this is probably the most user-friendly way to do it, just to visualize, because we're probably maybe not interested in building a predictive model after this. We just want to know how clean is our data generally. So use visualization techniques to spot any outliers in this data set. And we're being pretty vague. It might be better to just focus on one column at a time, but we'll see what happens. Okay, it didn't like that. Let's see if I ask for uh one column. Let's look for the body mass G column. Okay, so again, like I said, sometimes being specific is going to get you what you ask for. Okay, visuals in general work really well here with Python and Excel, because what I found is that sometimes, depending on the analysis you're trying to run, Python might use data structures that are kind of hard to display and aren't really built to be displayed in a, two by or like a row and column structured worksheet. So not to get too much into inside baseball here, but like tuples or dictionaries or things like that. Sometimes, or even some outputs are specific data structures, like if you're doing a predictive model or something like that. Sometimes the outputs just don't port very well into the grid. So what I found is that asking Python, can you visualize that? Like even if you're getting evaluation metrics back from, scikit-learn or something, and the output just doesn't really look very good, ask it to put it into a chart, like maybe use a bar chart or something like that, and often you'll get really good results back. So in this case, we were able to get a bar chart. Now, again, you could build a bar chart in Excel, but here we have one. And again, you want to try to interpret it. If you need help, how do I interpret this? Are there any outliers? You could do that. And again, if you've never seen a bar chart before, this probably isn't the best time to be learning it. But if you kind of remember, well, I think I'm supposed to see some dots there toward the end. I don't see any. Just kind of jog my memory here, right? Any data points outside the whiskers. Okay, so that's good. All right. Okay. Um, any questions so far about, we don't have a ton of time left. I think what I'm going to do is jump to a more advanced example. You've got a couple other ones, but before we dive off of this, any last questions about what we just did here, or you want to see something again or in particular? Hopefully you're getting a good flavor for when to use this, who's it right for, and how you might take advantage of it. Awesome. All right. So what I'm going to do, just to take it up a few levels here, is let's go to the text analysis demo. This is brand new stuff for Excel by and large, because Excel in the past has been pretty limited in terms of what it could do to work with text. Sure, there's been the left, right, and mid functions and text to column and things like that, but trying to build a model that would say, find me the positive and negative words and what are the most common words in negative reviews versus positive reviews, because maybe you have a lot of customer reviews, you're trying to understand what do people think about your business, what are topics, what are complaints that come up. Yeah, I'm constantly looking at text and feedback. That's really rich information. How can you use Excel to help you do that? Well, you can use Copilot. Now, this is a movie score review. We've already got these classed into positive and negative reviews. This is a bigger data set. It is several thousand rows here. What is it, like 500,000? or no, 50,000. I need a little comma separator. I'm getting old. Okay, but we're gonna try to run this. It might time out. It might not time out for you. It usually doesn't time out when I'm just doing Copilot by myself. When I'm sharing my screen and recording, it often does. So if that's the case, I might just take a sample and we can walk through it together. So again, you know what to do. First step is save this into your OneDrive. You want your autosave turned on. Okay, take a second here. Again, we're in the text analysis demo. I'm going to go back here to Copilot. Okay, it's going to take a second here just to scan in this data or do whatever it does here. And this is where we might start hitting a snag. So if that's the case, like I said, I might just take like the first several hundred rows or something and try it again. Let me know if you are able to get this into Copilot. Okay, there we go. So that's good. Okay, so we talked about this one says get data insights using Python. Give a unique data insight. Okay, so that's a little different than what it said before with advanced analysis. What I'm thinking is that Excel's just kind of testing different prompts and seeing what responds with people. In your next book, please reveal how to content analyze text data. Okay, it's possible. It's a good idea. There's a lot of resources on that. But you could, in theory, do that with Power Query, read data in from PDF files via Power Query, load it into a workbook. I don't know if it's the most efficient way, but if these are the tools that you have, because I think that's a big limitation in a lot of enterprise settings, is day in, day out, data analysts don't have access to Python for different IT reasons. You have it here, so you could do that, and that would be an interesting project. So anyway, let's click on this. We'll see if it works. And again, we don't have a lot of time anyway, so I will give this my best shot here. Now, if you are able to get this to run, oh, good. Okay, it's promising so far. I do have some resources that I shared, and I definitely want to walk through those before we part ways here. If you look back in the repo, there is a set of links that walk through how to do some of these analyses. Okay, so it looks like it's still going. Okay, in this case, it looks like it's trying to give me a few more insights. The sentiment distribution is evenly split. Okay, interesting enough, I guess. Let's see if we could do something more interesting. And let's say, what are the most popular, let's say 10 words for negative versus positive sentiment reviews. All right, and we'll see if this works. And then I'll probably close out the session here, give you some resources, next steps, and so forth. Okay, so this seems to be working. And again, understanding the basics of how this happens, what are the methods, what are the packages in Python, would be really useful, because as we start to work with text, it is unstructured data, which means it doesn't follow too many rules, and it can be kind of unpredictable. So here's a good example of this where it gave me the data back in something that is a bunch of tuples. It's pretty unreadable. So what I might say, yeah, you can visualize these words with a bar chart. Okay, can you visualize that as a bar chart? So this is a really good example where asking it as a visualization really forces Python to give you something that you can look at in Excel. And you could definitely dig into the code here if you were good enough Python, understand why is it using a tuple and so on and so forth. But we'll skip that for now. You'll see sometimes that Python does error out. It'll try again. That could be for different reasons. This is again pretty intelligent, so it can course correct often when there's a problem with maybe like a data type or maybe the function. It pulled a function from like a previous version of Python from the LLM. It's using code that's no longer supported in this version of a particular package. So a bunch of things that could be happening here, but we'll let this thing run. Hopefully it'll give it to us. And if not, you have the resource file or the blog post, I should say, that walks through a completed example. Okay. So way to end on a face plant, but that's okay. Let me share an example of what should have happened. And what I should probably just do is get in the habit of using a smaller data set for these demos. But okay, so this is from my blog. You're going to see that if you run this, you will get something like this. You can even build a predictive model, maybe trying to predict the sentiment. Is it a positive or negative review? You can use logistic regression it used in that case. And again, don't be afraid to ask, why did you use logistic regression? What are the assumptions? Are these the right assumptions to have here? And so on and so forth. So hopefully this is a good overview of Copilot. You'll see that some things don't work as you intend. I would say that with the recording and everything, it does add a little bit of pressure on things processing because it's not always this erratic, or maybe it is. Maybe it's just my bias. But let me share a couple of links and resources for you. As I mentioned, I do have some resources for you. The files are here, so if you wanted to walk through using this for time series analysis, you could. If you wanted to use this for data visualization, you could. Of course, there are a bunch of other use cases, and you can certainly explore those on your own. Upcoming events is my blog on LinkedIn. I mean, well, I post a lot on LinkedIn, but my blog is on my blog. So you can look at those links in the chat. Upcoming events. So let me share my screen here. So I've got a lot of events coming up. Thank you again for attending today. I hope you learned a few things. Appreciate those of you who had some insights and questions. That makes these a lot more interesting for me. And you'll see there's stuff on all sorts of topics. Some of them have to do with my books, some of them are other topics, and most of these are recorded. This one is recorded. So again, I'll send out all the stuff in an email. So sign up for as many of these as you want, and I would love to see you there. And then last but not least, I'm going to share in a second here a feedback form. If you could fill this out, that would be great because I don't charge any money for these. I've experimented with doing it in the past. It's really not worth it. This is just a good opportunity for me to get back to the community, try new ideas, make sure that things are sticking and who's interested in this. In exchange, really the only data I ask for is if you could fill this out. That would be awesome. This way I know what people are thinking. I have reviews that I can share with interested clients, and it just helps me run my business because unfortunately I can't just teach Excel all week long and pay my bills. I would love it if that were reality, but it's not. I need to earn a living like everybody else, and this kind of data is what helps me do that. So I'm going to go ahead and stop recording. And I really appreciate everybody coming. I don't know if anybody's going to be at the Excel Summit, either online or in person, but I'd love to see you there. I'm going to have a couple of weeks off here where I'm going to be at the summit. And then I'm doing some personal Euro traveling throughout the first couple of weeks of February. So I'm excited about that. When I get back, there will be plenty more content. Yeah, so that's how it works. I will post the link to YouTube. So I will share all this in an email. I'll package it up. It'll go out over email. It'll go on my YouTube. And those are the post-session logistics here. So let me stop recording.